The call came in at 12:42 a.m., neighbors reporting strange noises in the old Venner house. Sergeant Cole Harker had been on enough night calls to know most turned out to be nothing, but this one felt different the moment they pulled up. Shadow, his full black German shepherd, was already tense in the back seat, staring toward the dark house like he knew something was waiting inside. The place was silent, the driveway half buried in snow, the lights all off. But when they circled around back, the laundry room door was ajar. Cole stepped closer, his flashlight cutting into the dark, and froze when a small voice came from somewhere inside the wall. "He's watching." Snow crunched under Cole's boots as he stepped through the back doorway, the cold air from outside clinging to his uniform. Shadow moved ahead of him, nose low, tail stiff, his claws clicking softly against the tile floor. The laundry room smelled faintly of detergent and dust, an odd mix, like someone had cleaned in a hurry and then left it untouched for months. The washing machine was unplugged, its cord curled on top. The dryer had a thin layer of lint along the vent, like no one had used it in a long time. Cole's flashlight beam swept across shelves lined with bottles, folded towels, and a single cracked laundry basket. The small window above the washer was covered in frost, the glass fogged with the cold. Shadow stopped suddenly. His ears stood straight, his head turning toward the far wall, the one opposite the machines. His body language shifted. Not the tense forward lean of aggression, but something else, alertness mixed with hesitation. Cole followed his gaze and noticed it, a faint vertical seam running from the floor up about 3 feet. The paint here was just slightly different, like a section of drywall had been replaced or patched over. He crouched, the beam of his flashlight angled low. The seam met the floor unevenly, leaving a narrow gap, small enough to miss at first glance, but big enough for sound to travel through. Cole leaned in closer. "Hello? This is Sergeant Harker with County Police. Is someone in there?" For a moment, silence. Then, the faintest rustle, like fabric shifting. A child's whisper slipped through the gap. "He's watching." Cole froze. The voice was so soft he almost thought he'd imagined it. "Who's watching?" he asked quietly. No answer, just a quick, shallow breath, followed by silence again. Shadow inched forward, nose pressed near the seam, ears twitching as he sniffed. His hackles began to rise. Cole's eyes shifted toward the frosted window. The cold glass shimmered under the beam of his light, and then, in the faint reflection, he saw it. A figure. It was tall, unnaturally thin, and standing perfectly still in the snow just beyond the window. The head was angled slightly to one side, as if listening. Even through the frost, Cole could make out pale skin and the faint shadow of its eyes. He turned sharply toward the window, raising his flashlight, but in that split second, it was gone. The girl's whisper came again, urgent this time. "Don't open it, don't let him in." Cole backed away from the wall, moving closer to the window with his rifle drawn. Shadow stayed near the seam, growling low, his body rigid. Cole scanned the yard. Snow stretched out unbroken toward the tree line. No tracks, no sign of movement, like the figure had never been there at all. But he knew what he'd seen. The girl inside the wall shifted again. "Please, he's here." Cole crouched near the gap. "You're safe. I'm right here. We're going to get you out, okay?" "No." Her voice cracked, louder now, desperate. "If you open it, he'll know." Cole hesitated. Every instinct told him to get her out immediately, but the raw panic in her voice made him stop. "All right," he said carefully. "We won't open it yet. But I need you to tell me, is there another way into the space you're in?" She was quiet for a long time. Then, only from the outside. "But he's watching that too." Cole's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a scared child hiding from a stranger, there was something about the way she said he's watching that made it feel heavier. Like she didn't mean someone was just looking at her. She meant he was waiting. From the corner of his eye, Cole saw Shadow's head snap toward the hallway door. A faint sound carried through the house, a slow, deliberate creak, like someone putting weight on an old floorboard. Cole stood, shifting his grip on the rifle. "Dispatch," he said into his radio, voice low. "We have an unknown subject possibly inside the residence. Advise backup to expedite." Static crackled, then the dispatcher's voice came through, "Copy. ETA 4 minutes." Cole looked at Shadow, who was already moving toward the door, ears forward, body low. The dog wasn't just alert, he was tracking. Something was in the house. Cole turned back to the wall. "Stay quiet. Don't move until I come back for you." From inside, the girl whispered one last time. "He's already inside." Cole stepped into the hallway, rifle ready, his flashlight beam cutting a narrow path through the dark. The temperature inside the house was strangely uneven, pockets of cold air brushed past him like he'd opened a freezer door. Shadow moved ahead, his paws silent against the hardwood. His head turned sharply toward every creak, every faint groan of the old structure. The dog's body language was unmistakable, something was here. Cole's boots made almost no sound, but the floor beneath them spoke anyway. The house was old, the kind that remembered every step. Somewhere ahead, another set of footsteps answered his own, light, deliberate, as if matching him stride for stride. He stopped. The echo stopped. He moved again. So did it. Shadow froze mid-step, head swinging toward the dining room to the left. Cole followed his gaze. The room was dim, moonlight filtering through lace curtains. The long wooden table sat bare, its chairs neatly tucked in. But along the far wall, something was off. A shadow darker than the rest of the room seemed to cling to the corner, tall and narrow. Cole adjusted his light. The beam hit the corner, and found nothing. The shadow dissolved into ordinary darkness. A faint tapping came from above. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the ceiling. Attic. Cole's radio crackled softly with static, the dispatcher's voice almost drowned out. "Unit 7, status?" "Still clearing," Cole murmured. Footsteps inside. Possible attic movement. Child located, concealed in laundry wall cavity. No visual on suspect. Copy. Backup inbound, 2 minutes out. 2 minutes. A lot could happen in 2 minutes. Shadow's ears swiveled toward the sound again, this time back toward the laundry room. Cole's gut tightened. They retraced their steps quickly. The laundry room door was still open, the cold seeping in from outside. Cole knelt near the wall. "You still there?" No answer. "Kid? Talk to me." A faint, trembling breath came through the seam. Then, he moved. "Who?" "The one watching. He's not outside anymore." Cole's throat went dry. "Where is he now?" The pause that followed felt like it stretched for minutes. "Closer." A sound came from the window. Not from outside, but from the frame itself, like fingers brushing along the glass. The frost shifted slightly, a pattern forming for half a second before fading away. Shadow's growl deepened into something almost guttural. Cole rose, moving toward the window with his rifle raised. The glass was fogged from the inside now, but he could still see faint impressions, marks that looked disturbingly like handprints pressed flat. Then they slid slowly downward and vanished. He turned sharply toward the door that led outside. It was still ajar by just an inch, too small for someone to pass through, but enough to let the wind hiss in. He shut it quietly, the latch clicking into place. The girl's voice came again, low but firm this time. "If you keep him out, he'll stay in." Cole turned back toward the seam. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. The cold deepened suddenly, enough that his breath fogged heavily in the beam of his light. Somewhere deeper in the house, a floorboard creaked again. Shadow whipped his head toward the sound. This time, Cole heard it too, footsteps moving fast. They weren't upstairs. They were on the same floor. Cole moved quickly, sweeping the flashlight across the hallway. The light caught the edge of the living room, the glow falling on a figure moving between the furniture, too tall to be a child, too fluid in its motion to be human. It slid, not walked, across the floor, turning just enough that Cole caught the pale curve of its face before it vanished behind the couch. He advanced slowly, rifle trained ahead. Shadow circled wide, teeth bared, positioning himself between the figure's last location and the laundry room door. When Cole reached the couch, he swung around it, empty. The air in the room felt wrong, thicker somehow, like the heat had been pulled out entirely. His light swept over the coffee table, the cold fireplace, the curtained window, until it stopped on the far wall. Scratches. Long, parallel grooves in the drywall, just above the baseboard. They were fresh. Shadow barked sharply, snapping Cole's attention back toward the laundry room. The door was swinging slowly shut. Cole sprinted back, boots thudding against the floor. He shoved the door open hard, rifle raised. The wall seam was still there, the girl's shadow faint inside. But she was pressed further back now, eyes wide. "He's here," she whispered. Something moved in his peripheral vision. Cole spun toward the shelves. A bottle of detergent toppled to the floor, rolling slowly until it stopped at his boot. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, 3 knocks. This time, from inside the wall. The girl flinched hard, her small hands clamping over her mouth. Cole stepped forward, but she shook her head violently, tears spilling down her cheeks. Shadow lunged toward the seam, snarling, teeth snapping at something just out of reach. The sound he made wasn't the sound of a dog warning, it was the sound of a dog in a fight. Cole grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, I need that backup now." The line went dead, replaced by nothing but static. The static hiss from the radio faded into the cold silence of the room. Cole stared at the little girl, her eyes huge in the dim light, her hands still pressed tightly over her mouth. Shadow was locked on the wall seam, his muscles tense, a low growl vibrating deep in his chest. Cole lowered the radio and tried again. "Unit 7 to dispatch, come in." Nothing. Just the same lifeless hiss. That's when he heard it, something faint, muffled, but undeniably there. A shuffling sound from inside the wall. It wasn't the light scurry of a rat or the flutter of something small. It was heavy, slow, deliberate. Cole crouched low, moving his flashlight closer to the seam. The beam cut through the narrow gap at the bottom and illuminated nothing. Just darkness. The girl shifted slightly, retreating deeper into the narrow space. "You can't see him," she whispered. "Not unless he wants you to." Cole swallowed hard. "Then why is he in there with you?" Her eyes darted to the wall around her, scanning like she could see more than he could. "He's not here, not all the way. Sometimes he's inside. Sometimes he's between." The shuffling stopped. A sudden, sharp tap hit the drywall inches from Cole's face. Not from her side, from the space in the wall itself. Shadow lunged at the seam, claws scraping against the floor, teeth snapping at the invisible barrier. His barks were deep, furious. Cole stood fast, rifle coming up. "We're not staying in here." The girl shook her head violently. "No. If you open it, he'll take both of us." "I'm not leaving you in a wall while something's in there with you," Cole said. Shadow froze, nose pressed against the gap, nostrils flaring. His ears flicked back once, a warning, and then he stepped away. Cole didn't have time to wonder why. The temperature dropped again, a wave of cold rushing past them as though someone had opened a door to the dead of winter. Cole's flashlight flicked briefly as if the battery was dying. In that moment of dimming light, the seam in the wall seemed to ripple, not like the structure itself moved, but like something was pressing against it from the inside. The girl's voice was a thread now. He's between the walls. He likes the spaces where no one looks. Cole's instincts screamed at him to get her out. He reached for the multi-tool on his belt, flipping out the blade to pry the base of the drywall. The first pull cracked the paint, splintering the plaster. The house went completely silent. Then, 3 knocks. But this time they weren't in one spot. The sound traveled, knock knock knock, fast, running the length of the wall toward the hallway. Shadow whipped around and bolted for the door, barking furiously. Cole dropped the multi-tool and followed, his rifle sweeping ahead. They reached the hallway in seconds, but it felt longer. Every step was followed by that moving knock, like something huge was racing them inside the walls. It stopped at the corner where the hall met the front entry. Cole froze. Shadow did too. The space between the studs there had a thin, discolored line running up from the floor, an older seam, patched over decades ago. A bulge pressed out from the wall, distorting the surface just slightly. Then it sank back in. The girl's muffled voice carried faintly from the laundry room. "He's going to come out." Cole's pulse slammed in his ears. "Not if I get him first." He advanced on the seam, rifle steady, and drove his boot hard into the baseboard. The plaster cracked, the wall groaning. The house reacted. A rush of cold air poured from every seam, every gap, every old patch in the drywall. It howled through like wind in a cave. Shadow barked, snapping at the air as if something invisible brushed past him. Cole backed toward the laundry room. The sound of the wind grew louder, but under it he could hear something else, a scraping, climbing sound, moving upward through the studs. He knew where it was going. The attic. Cole turned sharply. "Shadow, with me." They ran for the narrow pull-down ladder in the hall ceiling. Cole yanked the cord, the steps unfolding with a dry creak. A gust of frigid air spilled down from the opening, carrying the smell of damp wood and something faintly metallic. He climbed quickly, rifle first, flashlight beam cutting across dusty beams and insulation. The attic was low and sprawling, a maze of rafters and shadow. And in the far corner, something moved. It was tall, thin, and almost too pale to see against the frost-coated wood. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted like it had been waiting for him. It didn't run. It simply slid backward into the wall, vanishing as though it had stepped behind a curtain. Cole's flashlight hit nothing but boards. He swore under his breath, then dropped back down to the hallway. The girl's voice came again, louder now, panic in every syllable. "Don't let him in here." Cole rounded into the laundry room and froze. The seam in the wall was wider now. A thin, pale hand was reaching through, fingers curling against the floor. Shadow hit it before Cole could move, teeth clamping down with a vicious growl. The hand yanked back instantly, disappearing into the darkness. The seam closed. The girl was sobbing now, rocking in the narrow space. Cole dropped to a knee. "We're ending this. Right now." Her tear-streaked face lifted just enough to whisper one more thing: "You can't. He's not in the house. The house is in him." Cole stared at her, the words hanging in the cold air like frost. "The house is in him." They didn't make sense, but they also didn't sound like the ramblings of a frightened child. There was conviction in her tone, like she'd been living with this truth far longer than she should have. Shadow paced in front of the wall, his hackles still high, every breath coming out in sharp, white puffs. He kept glancing toward the hallway, then back at the seam, torn between two threats. Cole's gut told him that staying still meant giving it time to choose when to act. And whatever it was, he didn't want it to have that choice. "All right," he said, voice low but steady. "You're coming out. Now." The girl shook her head, pulling her knees tighter to her chest. "If you open it." "I'm not asking," Cole cut in. His tone wasn't unkind, but it left no room for argument. "If I leave you here, you won't see morning." Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak again. Cole sheathed his rifle across his chest and reached for the multi-tool he'd dropped earlier. He wedged the blade into the gap at the base and pushed until the wood splintered. Paint cracked, and a strip of drywall crumbled under his hand. The seam widened, just an inch, and the temperature dropped another degree. A low hum began to vibrate through the wall, so faint it might have been mistaken for the wind if not for the fact that it was inside. Cole pried harder, Shadow's growls deepening in rhythm with the sound. A chunk of drywall fell away, exposing darkness beyond. Except, it wasn't the narrow cavity he expected. The beam of his flashlight didn't hit the far stud just a few inches in. It kept going. The space beyond wasn't a wall, it was a room. A room that shouldn't exist. Cole leaned closer, sweeping the light inside. The space was maybe 8 feet wide, but the ceiling disappeared into shadow far above. The walls weren't wood or insulation, they looked like rough stone, wet and slick, glistening in the beam. The floor wasn't tile or carpet, but packed dirt, faintly indented as though something had been pacing there. The girl sat pressed against the far side, her small frame dwarfed by the space. "I told you," she whispered. Cole's skin prickled. He'd done building clearances, seen crawlspaces, even storm cellars tucked under floors, but this was wrong. The house couldn't have hidden something like this. Shadow stepped forward, his nose in the opening, ears flat against his head. He didn't bark this time. He whimpered, just once, then backed away. Cole didn't like that. "All right, kid," he said, forcing his voice steady. "I'm going to reach in. You're going to grab my hand, and we're getting you out." Her eyes darted to something in the shadows behind her. "We can't. He's not sleeping anymore." Cole's pulse jumped. "Who's he?" She didn't answer, but her gaze didn't move from that dark corner. Cole swept the flashlight toward it. At first, there was nothing. Just wet stone and shadow. Then, the shadow moved. It didn't step or lunge. It unfolded. A tall, thin shape straightened slowly from where it had been crouched. Its skin was the same pale color he'd glimpsed before, its eyes reflecting the light like an animal's. The moment the beam hit its face, the flashlight flickered. The thing didn't blink. It just tilted its head at him, the same way it had in the attic. Cole yanked the light away and grabbed for the girl. "Now!" She scrambled forward, but as she moved, the thing shifted too. Not running, sliding, like the space between her and Cole was an actual distance. Shadow erupted into furious barking, teeth snapping at the opening. Cole reached in further, his hand closing around the girl's wrist just as the cold hit. It was more than cold, it was like being submerged in ice water, like the heat was being drained straight from his bones. The thing's arm extended, far longer than it should have been. Its hand, thin, with too many joints, reached for hers. Cole pulled hard, yanking her through the opening and into the laundry room. She collapsed against him, sobbing, her bare feet streaked with dirt. The seam didn't stay open. The wall began to close, the edges knitting back together as though it had never been broken. And just before it sealed, Cole saw one last thing, the pale face pressing right up to the gap, its lips moving in a whisper he couldn't hear. Then it was gone. The laundry room was silent again, but the cold remained. Cole backed them toward the hallway, rifle up. Shadow stayed between them and the wall, his growl constant now. The girl's voice was raw when she spoke. "You shouldn't have opened it. Now he knows your voice." Cole kept his rifle up as they moved into the hallway, Shadow's low growl rumbling like a constant warning. The girl clung to his jacket, her bare feet soundless against the floor. The cold followed them like a draft they couldn't outrun. His mind was racing. If the wall could open into a space that shouldn't exist, if something lived in there, then the safest move was to get out of the house. "Now. We're leaving," he said, his voice low but firm. "You stick with me, you don't let go. Got it?" The girl didn't nod. She just whispered, "It's not going to let us." Cole didn't answer. He didn't need her fear feeding into his. He had a plan: straight to the front door, out to the street, call in every backup unit within 20 miles. Shadow moved ahead, ears forward, the leash taut. The hallway felt longer than before, the shadows thicker. The old framed photographs on the walls seemed wrong now. He didn't remember them facing this way. In one frame, a faded photo of a house from decades ago hung crooked, the front yard covered in snow. The glass was cracked, and something faint, almost like a reflection, seemed to stand in the upper window. Cole turned his focus back to the door. The brass knob glinted faintly in his flashlight beam. He reached for it. The girl's hand tightened on his arm. "Don't." He turned the handle anyway. The door swung inward with a long groan, and the freezing wind hit instantly, sharp enough to sting his face. But it wasn't the street outside. Cole froze in the doorway. Where there should have been a shoveled sidewalk and quiet suburban street, there was a stretch of dark woods. The trees were bare and black against a moonless sky, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the house. A narrow path led away into the dark, half buried in snow that didn't match what was falling outside when they arrived. Behind him, the girl's voice was a thread of breath. "Told you." He moves the doors. Cole scanned the tree-line. The cold was deeper here, biting. He didn't see movement, but every instinct screamed that they were being watched. Shadow took a single step onto the threshold, then stopped dead. His hackles rose. His teeth bared, but no sound came out. Cole glanced down. Shadow's paw prints in the snow didn't sink. The flakes weren't melting on his fur. It was like they weren't in real snow at all. He pulled Shadow back and shut the door. The latch clicked, the sound echoing down the hallway in an unnatural way. He turned to head for the back door, and stopped. The hallway behind them was gone. In its place stretched another corridor, narrower, lined with doors on either side. The wallpaper was peeling, the air thick with damp. There was no sign of the laundry room, no sign of the familiar layout. The girl didn't look surprised. It likes to change things when it's hunting. Cole's grip tightened on his rifle. "We're not playing this game." He picked a door at random, the second on the right, and shoved it open. It led into a dining room. Not the same one he'd cleared earlier. This one was older, dust thick on the table, chairs mismatched. The single light fixture above the table swung slowly, creaking, though there was no breeze. Cole scanned the corners. In the far end of the room, a tall, narrow cabinet stood slightly ajar. Something shifted inside. Shadow bolted forward, barking, his claws skidding on the wood floor. Cole followed, yanking the cabinet door open with his free hand. Empty. Just shelves. The barking cut off. Shadow stood frozen, staring at the empty space like he was seeing something no one else could. The girl stayed in the doorway, her voice trembling. "He's in between again." Cole's flashlight flicked, once, twice, before coming back. From somewhere deep in the walls, the knocking began again. Slow, deliberate. 3 taps. Then silence. Cole backed out of the dining room, steering them down the corridor. "We keep moving until we find a door that leads out. Don't stop for anything." They passed more doors, some closed, some open to rooms that shouldn't exist, a child's bedroom with furniture draped in sheets, a bathroom where the mirror was fogged as if someone had just stepped out of the shower, a narrow stairwell that descended into blackness and ended after only 3 steps. Every so often, the knocking followed, never loud, never frantic, but always close enough to remind him it was there. They reached the last door at the end of the corridor. Cole turned the knob and pushed. This time, it opened to the street outside, their cruiser parked at the curb, backup unit lights flashing blue in the distance. Relief surged through him. "Go," he ordered, pushing the girl forward. She didn't move. "Kid." Her eyes were fixed on the cruiser. "It's not real." Cole looked again. Shadow was already standing in the open doorway, and the dog's reflection in the cruiser's windshield wasn't a reflection at all. It stood still while Shadow moved, its head tilting in that same unnatural way. Cole slammed the door shut. When he turned back, the corridor was gone again. They were standing in the laundry room. The seam in the wall was wider now. The seam in the wall stretched wider than before, jagged cracks spreading through the paint like veins. From inside came that low, steady hum Cole had heard earlier, except now it was louder, resonating in his chest like standing too close to a heavy generator. Shadow planted himself between the wall and the girl, his body rigid, teeth bared. His growl wasn't warning anymore. It was a challenge. Cole raised his rifle, aiming straight at the opening. "Stay behind me," he ordered the girl. She didn't answer. She was staring into the dark gap as if something in there had fixed its gaze on her and wouldn't let go. The air turned sharp and electric, making the tiny hairs on Cole's arms stand up beneath his jacket. Then came the sound, a faint dragging, like something heavy shifting just out of sight. Cole took a step closer, flashlight cutting into the darkness. He didn't see anything at first, just the uneven stone walls, the packed earth floor. Then, like liquid shadow, something began to seep forward. It wasn't walking. It was stretching, as though the darkness itself was pulling free from the walls. The shape lengthened, pale limbs emerging one at a time, fingers brushing the floor. Cole didn't wait for it to step out. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report thundered through the laundry room. Plaster dust rained from the ceiling. The beam of the flashlight caught the pale figure recoiling, but not in pain. More like surprise. Then it moved. Its arm shot forward, far too fast, far too long. The hand, thin, bone-white, with fingers that bent in the wrong places, snatched at Shadow. The dog twisted away, jaws clamping down on the wrist. His growl deepened, vibrating through the whole room. The thing didn't pull back. It pulled forward, yanking Shadow toward the wall with terrifying strength. "Shadow!" Cole lunged, grabbing the dog's harness with one hand and firing again with the other. The second shot tore into the pale arm, and this time, it let go. Shadow scrambled back, fur bristling, still snarling at the opening. The girl's voice was high, panicked. "He wants you to follow." Cole's flashlight beam swept the space inside. The figure was retreating into the darkness, but its head was turned, watching him even as it moved away. Cole didn't follow. Instead, he reached for the girl's hand and pulled her toward the hallway. But the house wasn't done. The doorway to the hall wasn't a doorway anymore. It was another corridor, the narrow one they'd been trapped in earlier. The hum rose, the walls seeming to close in, the peeling wallpaper curling inward as though pulled by invisible hands. Cole dragged the girl forward. Shadow stayed tight to his side, every muscle ready to spring. They passed the first door. Closed. Second door, also closed. Third door, open, but inside was nothing but blackness. Not darkness, blackness, like looking into a space where light didn't exist. From behind them came the sound, quick, sharp footsteps, getting faster. Cole didn't look back. "Move!" They reached the fourth door and shoved it open. It was the dining room again, but wrong. The table was gone. The light fixture above swayed violently, though there was no wind. The far wall was missing entirely, replaced by a yawning black gap. The hum became a roar. And then, without warning, the floor tilted. Not collapsed, tilted, like the whole room was sliding toward the gap. The girl screamed, her feet skidding on the wood. Cole grabbed her, slamming his shoulder into the doorframe to hold them steady. Shadow scrambled, claws gouging deep lines in the floor as he fought the pull. Something moved in the blackness beyond the gap. Long limbs, unfolding. Cole shoved the girl back into the hallway and slammed the dining room door. The pull stopped instantly, the hum dropping back to that low, steady vibration. He turned, breathing hard. We keep moving. No stopping. The girl's eyes glistened. It's not going to stop. He likes it when they run. They pushed on down the corridor. The knocking started again, this time on both sides of the hallway, moving along with them. Cole could feel it now, not just in the walls, but in the floor beneath his boots. They reached the end of the corridor. One door. Cole opened it. The cold air hit him immediately. It was the front porch again, but the snow outside was falling sideways, whipped by a wind he couldn't feel on his skin. The street was gone, replaced by a frozen field that stretched into darkness. And standing in the middle of it was the pale figure. It didn't move toward them. It just stood there, its head tilting slowly to one side, watching. The girl's grip on his sleeve tightened. If you step out, you won't come back. Cole shut the door. When he turned around, the laundry room was there again, seam in the wall wide open, the darkness inside pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Shadow growled once, deep and low. The hum rose. The hum wasn't just sound anymore, it was pressure. Cole felt it behind his eyes, in his teeth, in the tightness of his grip on the rifle. The walls seemed to breathe with it, swelling imperceptibly and then settling, as though the house itself was inhaling. Shadow moved sideways in front of Cole and the girl, planting himself between them and the seam. His stance was low, his lips drawn back over his teeth, a steady growl rolling out like distant thunder. Cole kept his rifle trained on the gap. The darkness inside wasn't still. It pulsed, faintly at first, then more noticeably, the way light filters through water when something moves beneath it. The girl's voice was barely more than a breath. It's coming all the way through this time. Cole didn't answer. He adjusted his footing, steady, ready. The first thing to emerge was a hand, that same bone-white stretch of fingers, but now more deliberate, curling into the floor like claws. The second followed, gripping the edge of the wall, pulling. The head came next. It ducked low to clear the opening, tilting in that unnatural way, pale skin tight over sharp bones. The eyes caught the flashlight beam again, glinting like glass marbles in the dark. Cole felt the cold roll out of the gap like fog, brushing over his boots, sliding up his legs until it found his spine. The thing didn't hurry. It slid one leg out, too long, joints bending in subtle, wrong ways, then the other. When it finally straightened, it filled the corner of the laundry room, its head brushing the ceiling though it never actually touched it. Shadow barked, lunging, but Cole's hand shot out to stop him. Not yet, he said under his breath. The thing's mouth opened, not wide, not screaming, just enough for the air to shift. Cole couldn't hear words, but the girl flinched like she could. She gripped his jacket. He's asking for you to give me back. Cole's jaw tightened. Tell him no. Her head moved in the smallest shake. You can't say no. He'll take something else if you do. The figure took a step forward. The floor didn't creak under its weight. Cole's finger hovered on the trigger. If you move any closer. It didn't stop. Shadow exploded forward. Cole barely kept his footing as the harness yanked taut. The dog's teeth snapped inches from the thing's leg, and the figure stepped aside without looking down, like Shadow wasn't worth acknowledging. That was worse than any counterattack. Cole fired. The shot slammed into its torso, the impact loud in the cramped space. The figure staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, its head turned, slowly, until its gaze locked directly on him. The hum dropped in pitch, rattling the glass jars on the laundry shelf. Then, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Cole's flashlight beam wavered as his pulse pounded. He swept the light across the space, and the figure wasn't there anymore. The girl was shaking. "Don't move. If you move, it knows where you are." Cole didn't get the chance to test her theory. Something cold brushed the side of his neck. He spun, light snapping toward the contact, just in time to see the pale face inches from his own, the head tilting further than a human neck should bend. Shadow launched upward, hitting it square in the chest. They went down together in a tangle, but instead of hitting the floor, they vanished into the darkness where the seam had been. Shadow. Cole dropped to his knees, reaching for the gap, but the wall was solid again. No seam. No opening. The girl was crying now, her hands over her mouth to muffle the sound. Cole slammed his fist against the drywall. Shadow. The hum began again, further away now, like it had moved into another part of the house. Cole stood, scanning the corners. He had to find that opening again. Where's the next door to his place? The girl hesitated. You can't choose it. He does. Cole exhaled sharply, forcing himself to think. The thing had taken Shadow, but it hadn't taken them, not yet. Which meant it wanted something. And Cole wasn't about to wait around to see what. The humming shifted again, coming from the direction of the hallway. The girl's gaze followed it. He's going to let you follow. Cole chambered another round. Then we follow. And we take him back. Cole kept the rifle tight to his shoulder as he stepped toward the hallway. The hum was steady now, drawing him forward like a wire hooked to his chest. The girl stayed close, her hand gripping the back of his jacket so firmly that her knuckles were white. The house didn't feel still anymore. It felt alive. The floor had a faint give beneath his boots, like walking on wood that had been softened by water, even though it was dry. Every few steps, something in the distance gave a faint, muffled thud, as if the place had a heartbeat. They reached the hallway door, and Cole opened it with the barrel of his rifle. It wasn't the hallway they'd left. The walls here were bare beams, the insulation hanging in torn strips like old curtains. Rusted nails jutted out, some bent, some streaked with dark stains. The space was narrow, too narrow for any normal person to have built it intentionally, yet it seemed to stretch on farther than the house's footprint should allow. The hum was louder now, echoing from somewhere deep ahead. The girl's voice was barely audible. "This is his place." Cole glanced back at her. "Where's Shadow?" She shook her head. "He's not keeping him. He's showing you what he can take." Cole didn't like the sound of that. He moved forward, scanning the tight corridor with the flashlight. The beam caught strange shapes nailed to the beams, not quite carvings, not quite stains. The closer he looked, the more they resembled faces. Not detailed enough to be clear, but the suggestion of eyes and a mouth was there, as if someone had pressed their face into the wall and left an imprint. They passed an opening on the left. Cole swept the light into it, and froze. It was a child's bedroom, small and perfectly intact. A bed with a pink quilt sat neatly made. A single window let in soft daylight, despite it being night outside. On the floor sat a stuffed bear, worn but upright, facing the doorway like it was waiting for someone. The girl whispered, "That's not mine." Cole shut the door without stepping inside. They kept moving. The corridor angled sharply to the right, and the wood underfoot creaked differently here, softer, almost like it was wet. Something moved in the beam ahead. Cole raised the rifle, but it wasn't the pale figure. It was Shadow. The black K9 stood perfectly still in the middle of the corridor, staring at him. No wag, no sound, just staring. Cole's heart lifted for half a second. "Shadow." The girl yanked his jacket hard. "Don't." Cole's light stayed on the dog. Shadow didn't blink. His chest didn't even rise with breath. Then the hum changed pitch, and Shadow's head tilted. Not like Shadow's head ever had before. Cole fired. The bullet tore through the form, which dissolved instantly into black dust that scattered and disappeared before hitting the floor. The hum returned to its original rhythm, almost like it was pleased. Cole's grip tightened on the rifle. "We keep moving." The corridor began to slope downward, the angle subtle at first, then steeper. The air grew heavier, the smell of damp earth rising around them. The walls changed again, no more beams and insulation. Now they were rough stone, slick with moisture, the texture too irregular to be anything human-built. The girl whispered, "We're under the yard now." Cole didn't ask how she knew. He could feel it, the weight above them, the shift in the air pressure, the way the cold here was deeper than any winter could make it. Ahead, a faint light flickered. Not bright, just enough to make shadows shift. They reached a widening in the corridor, an open space maybe 15 feet across. In the center, on the packed dirt floor, lay Shadow's harness. Cole stepped forward cautiously, scanning every inch of the room. No movement. No figure. Just the harness, the metal D-ring glinting in the flashlight beam. He crouched, keeping the rifle ready, and picked it up. It was cold. The girl stayed at the edge of the space. "He leaves things behind when he wants you to follow further." Cole turned toward her. "Further where?" She didn't answer. She just pointed to the far wall. There was a doorway there, but no door. Just another stretch of darkness, denser than anything his flashlight could cut through. The hum swelled, shaking the stones under his boots. Then, from within the black, two pale hands reached out and gripped the doorway edges. The pale fingers tightened on the stone, long nails scraping faintly. The sound wasn't loud, but in a heavy stillness it might as well have been a scream. Cole kept his rifle up, his breathing slow, every muscle tense for the thing to lunge. It didn't. Instead, it leaned forward, first its head, then its shoulders. The way it moved made Cole's skin crawl. It didn't bend like a person, more like it folded itself into shapes that shouldn't fit inside bones. Its head tilted, slow and deliberate, until those glassy eyes locked on his. The hum changed again, a deep, rolling note that vibrated the back of his skull. The girl's voice trembled. "He's asking what you'll give for your dog." Cole didn't take his eyes off the figure. "Tell him I'll give him nothing. I'm taking the dog." She shook her head quickly. "You can't take without paying. That's the rule here." The figure stepped fully into the space, and for the first time Cole could see its height clearly. It towered over him by at least 2 feet. Its limbs were thin, but the joints bulged strangely, like knots in a rope pulled too tight. Shadow's bark echoed from somewhere deep in the darkness behind it. Not frantic, calling. Cole took a step forward. "Bring him here." The hum shifted, rising into a tone that made the fine hairs on his arms stand straight. The girl winced. "He says you already brought him something he wants." Cole risked a glance at her. Her eyes were wide, terrified. Realization hit like ice water. "No," Cole said flatly. "She's not yours." The figure's head turned toward the girl. Its eyes didn't blink, didn't move, just fixed on her like she was the only thing in the room. The girl gripped Cole's jacket harder. "He's been looking for me since the first time I came here." Cole shifted his stance, putting himself more squarely between them. "Not happening." The hum dropped in pitch again, almost a silence, and then came back as something else entirely. Words. Low, distorted, like they were spoken from inside a deep cave. Cole couldn't make them out, but he could feel them. The meaning crawled under his skin without touching his ears. "Give and go." He raised his rifle. "Here's my counteroffer, you give me the dog, we walk out, and you never see either of us again." The figure didn't move at first. Then, with an unnerving fluidity, it stepped to the side. The black space behind it widened, stretching, deepening until the edges of the doorway seemed to pulse like a slow heartbeat. Shadow's bark came again, closer now. Cole kept his aim steady as he moved toward the opening. The girl clung to him, steps hesitant. The figure stayed where it was, head tilted, tracking them without a single muscle twitch. They crossed the threshold. The temperature dropped instantly, not the biting cold of winter, but a still, heavy cold like the air before a storm. The ground underfoot was packed dirt, uneven and damp. Shapes loomed faintly in the darkness, and Cole swept the flashlight toward them. He froze. They weren't shapes. They were people. Or, what was left of them. Figures stood perfectly still along the walls, some facing inward, some turned toward the black beyond. Their skin was gray, their eyes sunken. They didn't move, didn't breathe. The girl whispered, "They said no." Cole swallowed hard. Shadow appeared from the dark ahead, running toward them. Relief surged through Cole's chest as the K9 pressed against his leg, tail stiff but eyes locked on the figure still standing at the doorway. Cole crouched, one hand gripping the dog's harness. "We're leaving." The girl's voice was barely audible. "If we try without paying, he'll just take us back." Cole's mind worked fast. The figure hadn't moved. It was letting him think. Letting him feel like he had a choice. He had nothing to give it, nothing but himself. He rose, squaring his shoulders. "If someone's going, it's me. They go free." The girl gasped. "No." The hum spiked, rattling the ground underfoot. The figure took a single step forward, into the black, closing the distance by half without effort. It didn't speak, but Cole understood. "Not you." It wanted her. Cole's grip on the rifle tightened. "Then you get nothing." The hum became a roar, so loud the still figures along the walls trembled. The doorway behind them slammed shut, cutting off the faint light from the stone corridor. They were in his world now. The blackness pressed in on all sides, thick enough that Cole could feel it against his skin, like standing underwater. The hum was no longer steady, it rose and fell in sharp waves, almost like it was breathing faster, agitated. Shadow stayed glued to his side, ears flat, teeth bared but silent. The girl's hand clamped onto his jacket, small and shaking. The figure stood ahead of them, unmoving. Those glassy eyes were fixed solely on the girl, ignoring Cole entirely now. The silent figures along the walls seemed to lean forward just slightly, their empty eyes following the same line of sight. Cole knew the rules here. Or at least, the rule, give and go. But rules could be broken, if you were willing to deal with the consequences. He leaned down toward the girl, keeping his eyes on the creature. "When I say run, you hold on to Shadow's harness and don't let go. No matter what happens. Understand?" Her voice was barely audible. "He won't let us leave." "He will if he's too busy with me," Cole murmured. The hum deepened, vibrating in his chest. The figure shifted its weight, taking one long step forward. The girl pressed closer. Cole raised the rifle, slow and steady. "Last chance," he said, voice low. "You let us go, no one gets hurt." The thing didn't even blink. Cole fired. The shot cracked like thunder in the confined space, the muzzle flash lighting up the chamber for a split second. The bullet hit dead center in the figure's chest, but instead of dropping, it absorbed the impact. The hum turned into a rattling hiss. The unmoving figures along the walls stirred. Their heads snapped toward Cole in unison. "Run," he barked. Shadow lunged toward the far side of the chamber, the girl gripping the harness. Cole followed, firing again, not to kill, but to slow the thing's advance. The pale figure glided toward them, its movements faster now, arms extending, fingers reaching. One hand slammed into the dirt where the girl had been seconds before, leaving a deep, perfect impression. Cole shoved her forward, Shadow pulling hard toward a faint, impossible seam of light in the wall ahead. The hum became a roar, shaking the ground so violently that dirt sifted down from above. The still figures moved now, jerky, stumbling steps, arms reaching. Cole fired into them, each shot making them recoil but not fall. Go, go, go! Shadow pulled the girl straight toward the light. The closer they got, the more it looked like a doorway, not a real one, but a vertical tear in the black, edges glowing faintly. The figure was right behind Cole now. He could hear it, a sound like bones grinding together, like breath through broken glass. The girl dove through the light with Shadow. Cole turned at the threshold. The figure was only feet away, its arms outstretched, fingers splayed wide. Its face was expressionless, but its eyes, for the first time, narrowed. Cole stepped back into the glow, but not before dropping a lit flare at his feet. The world split. There was no noise, no light, just the sensation of falling sideways through something too tight to move in. Then, suddenly, they were in the laundry room again. Shadow barked, spinning to face the wall. The girl stumbled, falling to her knees. Cole yanked her up, pulling her toward the back door. Behind them, the seam in the wall was gone. The hum was gone. The house was silent. They burst out into the freezing night air, snow crunching under their boots. Cole didn't stop moving until they reached the truck. He shoved the girl inside, Shadow jumping in after her, and slammed the door. Only then did he look back at the house. Nothing moved. No lights. Just the faint sound of the wind. The girl sat quietly in the passenger seat, Shadow's head in her lap. She didn't look at him when she spoke. He'll wait. He always waits. Cole started the engine. Let him wait. As they drove away, the house disappeared into the storm. But the image of those pale eyes, unblinking and locked on the girl, stayed in Cole's mind. And in the silence of the cab, beneath the rumble of the engine, he could almost swear he heard the hum again.